This is Trending Daily. I'm Makhdoom Shahabuddin. Today we're talking about something that very few people expected just a few years ago. How Pakistan made a strategic comeback on the global stage in 2025 and how the country moved from a period of crisis management into a phase of strategic reassertion, not through slogans, not through luck, and not through one single event, but through a combination of military credibility, economic discipline, and diplomatic recalibration that changed how Pakistan is perceived internationally. In 2025, Pakistan was no longer being described as the sick man of South Asia or as a country permanently on the edge of default or instability. Instead, international publications, analysts, investors, and governments began to describe Pakistan as a stabilizer and a bridge and a partner. And that shift did not happen by accident. The core of Pakistan's comeback can be understood as a three-part transformation. First, Pakistan restored its debtors' credibility and internal security narrative. Second, Pakistan stabilized its economy and restored confidence in its financial system. Third, Pakistan rebuilt its diplomatic relevance by balancing relationships rather than depending on any single bloc. These three shifts reinforced each other, and together they created a new perception of Pakistan as a state that was no longer merely reacting to crisis, but actively shaping its strategic environment. Ladies and gentlemen, on the security front, 2025 was a defining year. The four-day military standoff with India in May, often referred to domestically as Marka-e-Haq, was not just another episode of regional tension. It became a technical and psychological validation of Pakistan's conventional deterrence. For years, Pakistan had faced the perception that India's growing military budget and accusations were creating an imbalance in the region. The May standoff demonstrated that Pakistan's modernization, particularly in air power and missile capability, had restored strategic balance. The Pakistan Air Force's deployment of JF-17 Block 3 aircraft equipped with long-range missiles showed that Pakistan could credibly defend its airspace and impose costs without escalating toward nuclear thresholds. That mattered not only to India, but also to global powers who seek stability in South Asia rather than volatility. This military performance had diplomatic consequences. It contributed to a thaw in US-Pakistan relations, with Washington approving a major F-16 modernization package and signaling that it viewed a stable Pakistan as necessary for regional balance. It also reinforced Pakistan's credibility in the Middle East, where Gulf states increasingly see Pakistan not just as a friendly country but as a reliable security partner. The establishment of Pakistan Army Rocket Force in 2025 further signaled that Pakistan was formalizing its conventional deterrence doctrine to allow precise retaliation without immediate nuclear escalation, which reassured international actors who are concerned about crisis stability in South Asia. At the same time, Pakistan's military leadership enforced a visible zero-tolerance approach toward violent extremism. Clear messaging that only the state holds authority over the use of force helped sanitize Pakistan's image and reassure investors that internal security risks were being managed rather than ignored. Counterterrorism was no longer framed as a defensive necessity alone, but as a part of Pakistan's responsibility as a regional stakeholder. Pakistan also used its diplomatic position to project itself as a moral and stabilizing voice in international forums. In late 2025, a UN expert report identifying India as the aggressor in a major border escalation in Kashmir was a significant diplomatic victory. It neutralized years of narrative building and demonstrated that Pakistan could win not only on the battlefield but also in legal and diplomatic arenas. At the same time, Pakistan emerged as a serious participant in discussions around the Gaza peace process, including potential contributions to peacekeeping arrangements, which elevated Pakistan's status from a regional actor to a global security contributor. Ladies and gentlemen, while security restored credibility, the economy restored confidence. After years of near default scenarios, inflation shocks, and fiscal chaos, 2025 became the year of stabilization. Pakistan achieved a primary fiscal surplus for the first time in decades. Inflation fell dramatically from crisis levels to single digits, and the current account moved into surplus. These were not cosmetic improvements. They reflected real structural changes, including subsidy rationalization, tax reforms, disciplined monetary policy, and increased export capacity. The stock market surge became a visible symbol of that shift. The KSE 100 reaching historic highs was not only a domestic story but a signal to international investors that Pakistan was investable again. Remittances reached record levels, IT exports crossed new thresholds, and the narrative began to shift from consumption driven growth to export led growth. That shift matters because export earnings, unlike aid or loans, create sustainable foreign exchange inflows. One of the most powerful symbols of reform was the privatization of Pakistan International Airlines. For 2 decades, state owned enterprise reform had been politically toxic and administratively impossible. Completing the PIA deal signaled seriousness to the IMF, to markets, and to private investors that Pakistan was willing to reduce the state's footprint and allow private capital to operate. It was not about one airline, it was about credibility. The operationalization of the Recalibration project under the Special Investment Facilitation Council (SIFC) added another layer. By unlocking mineral resources and integrating Pakistan into global green energy supply chains, Pakistan turned dormant assets into strategic leverage. Western, Chinese, and Gulf investors all took notice because Pakistan was no longer offering vague potential but structured opportunities with regulatory backing. Before moving forward, let's go out to the streets and see what the people of Pakistan have to say about year 2025.
इस साल पाकिस्तान का बड़ा वो हुआ है ज़बरदस्त कि आउटसाइड जो कंट्री है उन पर हमारा अतमाद बहाल हुआ है। उसके बाद हमारे पास फॉरेनर एड्स आ रही है, उसके अलावा हमारी कंस्ट्रक्शन कंपनी को बड़ा बूस्ट मिल रहा है, इन्वेस्टर आ रहे हैं और ये सब कुछ हमारी आर्मी चीफ की वजह से हुआ है। उसकी वजह से और मज़ीद अगले साल जो है वो भी बेहतरी आ जाएगी।
तो ये जो अभी पिछली बार इंडिया के साथ हमारी लड़ाई हुई है ना, तो इसमें माशाल्लाह हमारे जो फौजी जवान है ना, तो बहुत अच्छी कारकर्दगी दिखाई है हमारे एयरफोर्स ने। तो ये जो है ना हमने जीत लिया, लेकिन माशाल्लाह बहुत अच्छा हुआ और इंशाल्लाह आइंदा भी इसी तरह होएगा। तो बस अल्लाह खैर करे। पाक फौज जिंदाबाद, पाकिस्तान पाइंदाबाद।
पाकिस्तान के लिए 2025 अच्छा मुल्क रहा है और साल रहा है, क्योंकि एक इंटरनेशनल रिकग्निशन मिली, एक वॉर हुई थी, वॉर में जो है ना पाकिस्तान को फतेह हासिल हो गई।
तो 2025 तो माशाल्लाह से पाकिस्तान के लिए बहुत बेहतर साल रहा है। उसमें पाकिस्तान ने जो जंग जीती है उसकी वजह से सारी दुनिया की तवज्जो जो है वो हमारे ऊपर मरकूज़ हो गई है। अब पाकिस्तान की हर जगह पे जो है ना एक इज़्ज़त पाकिस्तान को मिल रही है। पाकिस्तान का जो प्राइम मिनिस्टर जाता है, ये जो आसिम मुनीर साहब जो जाते हैं, तो बेहतरीन किस्म का जो है ना पाकिस्तान ने इस मार्के में अच्छा रोल प्ले किया और दुनिया को बता दिया कि हमारी जो फ़ौज है वो दुनिया की बेहतरीन फ़ौज है। तो ये 2025 माशाल्लाह से पाकिस्तान के लिए बहुत खुशकिस्मत रहा है।
Welcome back. Diplomatically, Pakistan's pivot to geoeconomics finally began to produce results. Islamabad balanced its relationship rather than choosing sides. It deepened CPEC 2.0 with China while also signing mineral and energy deals with the United States. It strengthened strategic alignment with Saudi Arabia while acting as a bridge between Iran and the West. It expanded trade with Central Asia, Turkey, and the Gulf. This was not neutrality, it was strategic flexibility. The Strategic Mutual Defense Agreement (SMDA) with Saudi Arabia was especially significant because it institutionalized security cooperation at a level not seen before. Pakistan became not just a partner, but a guarantor. And that shifted how Gulf states perceived Pakistan's role in regional security. At the same time, Pakistan avoided becoming trapped in regional rivalries by maintaining open channels with Iran and positioning itself as an intermediary rather than a partisan actor. In 2025, Pakistan stopped being seen as a client state and started being seen as a connector state, a bridge between regions, a conduit for trade, a mediator in conflicts, and a partner in security. That is a fundamentally different identity. The story of Pakistan in 2025 is not the story of perfection. The country still faces social challenges, political tensions, and economic vulnerabilities. But the difference is direction. In 2025, Pakistan demonstrated that it could move forward deliberately rather than merely survive from crisis to crisis. It demonstrated that it could reform its economy, modernize its military doctrine, and recalibrate its diplomacy simultaneously. Pakistan did not become powerful in 2025. It became relevant again. And in international politics, relevance is power. Pakistan used its geography as an asset rather than a burden, its military as a stabilizer rather than a threat, and its diplomacy as a bridge rather than a shield. That is what made 2025 a turning point. This is Trending Daily. I'm Makhdoom Shahabuddin, and this was the story of how Pakistan made a strategic comeback on the global stage. We'll see you in the next episode.